Okay, two topics: selective outrage, the normalization of the absence of Congress. Topic number one: Tim Walz announced that he's no longer running for whatever the fuck in Minnesota. There's a lot of pressure on Minnesota right now because of this Nick Shirley fuck putting spotlight on the alleged fraud from the daycare, right? So they're saying, oh, fraud, immigrants, state led by a Democrat, three things that allow me to push my narrative. That's why we see on the MAGA side, oh, the left supports fraud now? Why would y'all be mad at this? Why are y'all trying to debunk the story? So forth and so on. They want to make this an own the libs thing. I'm starting to realize that they don't really care about the future of America or the progress of America or the well-being of America. Their driving factor is owning the libs. Even if they or their loved ones or the country, even if they all suffer, as long as they can say that they own the libs. Because if it was an outrage at fraud, if the allegations are true and there is fraud, scams, whatever the fuck, if the outrage was at the action itself, the action alone, there's no logic to be a Trump supporter. But when the fraud and the scam and the bullshit and the shit like that, when it allows them to push this narrative that all immigrants are bad and the left just wants the worst for America and blah, 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 now it's all they talk about, of course. It infuriates me when they do this because the National Guard, for example, was sent to all of these blue cities that the Trump administration claimed was a war zone. But Louisiana has been number one highest murder rate for quite some time, if I'm not mistaken. Mississippi, up there. Red states. The majority of government assistance going to red states. So if your outrage was at the action alone, you would never be saying, this is us owning the libs. That's the most infuriating part about it, is the selective outrage we see. And that all ties into this Venezuela situation, because I saw a video earlier today from a girl named Issa, I believe is how you pronounce it. Apologies if it's not, but she was talking about misinformation that Dean was spreading about the Venezuela situation. And she was talking about how people are celebrating, how Maduro is no longer in power. He was a terrible dictator. And because he was removed, the Venezuelan people are celebrating. I hear that. I hear that. But then when we speak out about the obvious problem with how that happened, here comes MAGA's dumbass saying, oh, the left called Trump a dictator, but then they support one and say that they didn't know. That's selective outrage. You're choosing to miss the point. If this Maduro guy is guilty of all the allegations and he's this awful dictator and things like that, and people in Venezuela are being oppressed and things like that, why would we be upset that these people have been liberated? We fully understand the celebration, but it's the normalization in our country of the executive branch ignoring things that need congressional approval, calling judicial decisions, calling the judges rogue because they blocked an order or they stood against them. It's the normalization of this when it scales from, we're going to send ICE everywhere and do all these illegal things with ICE, or we're going to send the National Guard everywhere, or we're going to try to prosecute these people with no evidence, and we're going to try to hire these bullshit attorneys to go after the people with no evidence. When we see that, and then it scales up to, we missile tapped another country, flew off into the sunset with their standing leader, whether it was illegitimate or not, and then on top of that, we are going to run the show for a while as American oil investors salivate at the idea. It's the normalization of the rules that make up the American government. It's the normalization of ignoring those rules that we're afraid of. That's why you see All the other countries say that this is a violation of international law and they condemn it. We can't celebrate the removal of a dictator as we watch another one forming. We can't do it. If you asked, okay, well, what is the alternative? I don't know. If Maduro was still there, still oppressing people, and now they're liberated, I can't get on here and say, oh, this shouldn't have happened. But it's the same way that MAGA will use this Minnesota situation as an excuse to push this narrative against immigrants and against the left. It's the same way they'll latch onto that. That's all the Trump administration needed when they wanted Venezuelan oil. Look up how China is involved with Venezuelan oil, how Russia is involved with Venezuela oil. You think they're going to take kindly to everything that's happening? We are celebrating with y'all that people on the ground feel liberated. But how do you want us to turn a blind eye to everything else? This is somebody who is selling Trump 2028 hats when our Constitution says 2 terms max no matter what. If it didn't say that, he wouldn't have won the first time. You think Trump would have beat Obama 2016? Be so for real. But it says 2 terms max. So if we're looking at somebody who's already pushing for something as unconstitutional as a 3rd presidential term, of course we worry when we see him say, fuck Congress, missile tap them, strike these narco boats, tariffs this, tariffs that. We're still trying to understand how something like mass shootings, especially at schools, has been normalized in this country. Now throw on the executive branch just ignoring everything. Basically saying, nuck if you buck, in a Republican fashion. It's the selective outrage of MAGA. You cannot be mad at the alleged fraud in Minnesota and then turn around and support an administration like Donald Trump. You all will say the Biden crime family and then turn a blind eye to the fact that the Trump family has tripled their net worth after 1 year that this man is in his 2nd term. Wasn't Doge supposed to fix all of the fraud and waste? Shouldn't Doge have caught Minnesota months ago? Wasn't there a budget for Doge? So if Doge didn't do its job over there, what was that money? Y'all don't look for frauds that don't fit your narrative. Y'all don't look for scams that don't fit your narrative. What are we doing? How did this become a divide? How are people not against dictators across the board? How are we not against fraud across the board? In this case, if we normalize this, what's stopping the U.S. from saying, you know what, we do want Greenland. Boom, military strike. We're going to run the show. You know what, we don't want Russia. We want Russia. Boom, giant war. Like how does this not cascade to World War III? If we normalize missile tap, take the leader, we run the show now. If we normalize that, y'all don't see the problem here? Of course I'm glad that Venezuelans and anybody is liberated from the rule and terror of a dictator, but I'm staring at one forming in my country, and they definitely don't like people like me. This is fucking terrifying. What is it? What fucking day is it? We're how many days into the fucking year? All my goddamn phones are dead. January, 5 days. 5 days in. I saw a story. It said that this man has missile tapped 8 countries in his first year in office. This man said he was going to be your peacetime president in 8 countries in year 1. Yeah. It's not a time we're celebrating. I'm sorry.